and I am doing that now. So this is a map of the world, as you can see. I am going to give you all whiteboard permissions. You should just have seen a little menu of icons turn up on your screen. The top one is a pointer that will drag things around. Don't use that. The second one is a star. If you double click on that, you can then click where you are in the world, and I've just put myself in California. And we've got someone, I can't tell if it's Peru, Bolivia, or Brazil. It's right there in the center of it. Peru, excellent. Welcome from Peru. And Sweden, a sunny evening, lovely. Yes, I actually was in Sweden in June one time, and it was just, it's magnificent to have these beautiful sunny evenings. Well, welcome from the very foggy central coast of California. We have a lot of fog. So, and we've got someone from Mexico, excellent, and someone from Eastern Europe, it looks like, the UK. All right, wow, this is great. So one of the things I'm going to say, since this is an introductory homeschooling talk, I wanted to point out that we can't really talk about sort of technical legal issues about homeschooling because every single one of us has a different situation. So I highly recommend that you go find a local homeschoolers group for that sort of support. I won't be able to answer any of your questions unless you're in California, and then the rest of you would just be bored. So, so we aren't going to talk about that, but I do, and I will get to this, highly recommend that you go and do some, get networked with local people. So that you can find out about legality issues and that sort of thing. And the next slide, they wanted me, oh, I have my load slides loaded, so I'm going to ignore that. So this is From School to Homeschool. And I wrote a book specifically about gifted children because I had gotten to know James Webb, who is the publisher of Great Potential Press, and it occurred to me that I could write a book that would be perfect for them. But the thing about the book is that now that it's out, I've been thinking, you know, really, I should have just said for your unusual learner, because almost everything you can say about gifted and accelerated learners is actually true in some sort of way of all sorts of unusual learners. So that's my plug for my book. Not that I'm here to plug my book, but anyway, that's why it's for your gifted child. And anyway, so I have worked, my background is I am a writer, and I wrote about parenting and education before I started homeschooling, and so I sort of changed my focus. So Aravinda says, who is an unusual learner? Unusual learner as in someone who doesn't fit in a school environment, which is really probably over half of children in the world. So, but there's the ones who are really on the edges, who really stick out, and whose needs really are not served. And that's where I come from. I ended up not choosing homeschooling because I knew anything about it. I knew nothing about it, but because I had a learner who could not be accommodated in the classroom. So the thing I want to really focus on in this talk is, what is your mindset? What is our mindset about education and about how we see the world? So you may be familiar with, I was an accidental homeschooler, yes. I also have called myself a reluctant homeschooler. I belong to the tribe of reluctant homeschoolers who end up loving homeschooling, but we were reluctant in the beginning, so that's our title. Carol Dweck is a psychologist who did these really simple experiments where she showed that you can actually change someone's performance on a task by changing their mindset about the task. And so she did really simple things, but when I read this, it wasn't the simple things that really really hit me. It was the more complex things, like your whole, we know what our parents have always said, whatever, you know, this sort of thing that you hear. It's like, you can do anything you put your mind to. Well, that's not true. I mean, I put my mind to becoming a world-class marathoner, and guess what? I never was a world-class marathoner. My knees and ankles gave out before my will to succeed gave out. So you can't do anything you put your mind to. However, you can change your performance by changing your mindset. So our mindset about education was created by so many things we have no control over: our national and regional culture, our own education, our parents' ideas of education, our friends' influence. You know, you have this complex set of preconceived notions about education that you probably, many of them, don't even recognize. I know that for me, I started homeschooling, I guess this is 7 years ago now, and I at first really didn't notice how much I had these very, very firm ideas about what education is and how it should happen. And yes, there's a link, thank you Marie, to mindset. I have to say, okay, I'm just going to say this. I thought that the content of the book was really great, but the way she writes is totally annoying. So I hope, you know, I think it's a book worth reading. Personally, I got it from the library, but I didn't think it was she has a website and she has articles and stuff too, so you can go to her website, Mindset Online. I shouldn't have said that, but it was very popular. She tried to write for a more popular audience, and that sort of annoys me in general. But anyway, so the question is, what is your mindset coming into this new thing that you're doing that is going to be one of the hardest things you've done in your life? I'm just letting you know. Homeschooling can be very hard. And you're walking in with this mindset. Are you the child who walks into her experiment thinking, I'm really good at figuring things out, and even though I don't know how to do this puzzle, I'm going to figure it out? Or are you the kid who walks into her experiment saying, I was really smart at that other puzzle, and now they've given me a different puzzle, and I'm not smart at that, so I don't know if I can do it. So which are you, and how can you change your mindset? So I put here generalization alert. Not all of us are going to have these exact ideas, opinions, but these are common things that people believe based on their experiences. Education is best left to professionals. Something you hear so often as a new homeschooler and as a seasoned homeschooler is, but how can you teach your children math if you don't have a degree in math? So you hear that a lot. Children learn best in a classroom of their age-based peers. This is something that we've all just accepted. It's like, you know, it's considered so revolutionary that in a Montessori classroom, they have 3 different ages in the same room together. Ooh, that's shocking. But of course, in the real world, that's not the way things work. You will not, even in college, your kids won't be there with just 18-year-olds when they get there. There's going to be, you know, the large amount of group of kids is going to be 18 to 22, but there's going to be adults that they have to interact with. There's going to be older students who have returned to school. There are going to be younger students who went to school early. There's going to be the kids of people who work at the school who are there. You know, everything, the world except outside of K-12 education is not a place where you're ever going to be in a large group of people all exactly the same age, except maybe if you go to your high school graduation. Yes, and Tamara says one of the biggest fears is that we worry whether we are doing right by our kids. And I will address that because that's a really big thing. State standards reflect what all children should learn at each age. This is something that a lot of us buy. I know that I didn't buy it completely because I personally considered standards to be a little too easy, a little not as academic as my kids are, because that's who my kids are. But the idea that somehow if you're in 4th grade in California, you're supposed to be learning about California missions, and am I doing something wrong to my daughter that during 4th grade we studied ancient Greece because everybody else learned about California missions? And I do know some homeschoolers who actually do their homeschooling that way. They stick with the state standards. So that's another thing that people think. If a child isn't learning, it's the teacher's fault. Lately, this blame the teachers thing has become huge in America, which is just crazy because, of course, the teachers have the kids for, if that, 6 hours a day, and then they have 32 kids. So really, your kid, even if time was portioned out exactly, would get 1/37th of a 6-hour period to themselves for the teacher paying attention to them, but really the teacher doesn't pay attention to them at all because the teacher largely pays attention to the kids that are causing some sort of difficulty in the classroom, either academic or behavioral. And so really when it comes down to it, your teacher has very little direct interaction with your child. So it's sort of funny that we blame the teachers when really the kids are not there all that much and the teachers don't have much time. A child who's unhappy in school needs to be fixed. Oh yes, our children needs to be fixed. If our child doesn't like at the age of 5 sitting in a classroom with artificial lighting and not getting to eat when she wants to, not getting to run around when she needs to, that somehow she needs to be fixed, but the school doesn't. So these are things that and certainly one of you said in the chat window that that was Lainey. I believed all these things before I started to unschool. Yes, so these are all things that a lot of us believed in, and Marie points out that we can fix the problem with our schools by beating up teachers about test scores. Like teachers have that much influence. If you actually, just as an aside, as my education writer self, I'll tell you that in the United States, standardized test scores correlate exactly with zip codes. So if a school is in a zip code where the average population socioeconomic class is upper middle class, they're going to get high test scores. And if it's socioeconomic class of lower middle class, they're going to median test scores. So test scores have some meaning, but they don't have the meaning that we give them. So the homeschool-based mindset, and again, more generalizations because homeschoolers come in as many flavors as families do. So we all have to learn how to learn. This is something that is so important for successful homeschoolers that some homeschoolers don't agree with. So you can already tell, I'm sure, that I'm more from the alternative education side of homeschooling, and I'm not from the side of homeschooling where you set up your home as a school and you have an exact schedule and your kids sit at a desk, mimicking school. I'm not that sort of homeschooler, and so a lot of my opinions and viewpoints are going to come from the fact that I'm not that sort of homeschooler. So if you are that sort of homeschooler, that's good for you. That's great, and don't think that I'm saying your choices are wrong, but that this is just where I'm coming from. So we all have to learn how to learn. It's really incredibly important, and most of our kids don't get the chance to learn how to learn until they're in college, which is a little bit late to be molding young brains. Each child is unique and learns differently. So schools are based on the fact that we do have this huge amount of humanity sort of somewhere in the center whose needs you can sort of serve by giving them all the same thing. And notice I hedged that. They're somewhere in the center and their needs can sort of be served. So, no school is perfect for any child, but there are schools that work for some group of kids, but a lot of kids their learning styles, their needs simply are not addressed in schools at all, because at schools they have to make a choice. Who are we teaching to? And so that's why public schools, you go from one public school to another, and they're more similar than they are different. But private schools, that's why private schools are so different, because they're trying to sell to some certain group of families and children. So state curriculum is not necessarily what every child needs to learn. There's nothing wrong with teaching my child about California missions, but there's no law that says that if your child doesn't learn about California missions in 3rd grade, she'll never get a job. So state curriculum is a good guideline. I mean, I know a lot of people who look at it just to see if they're sort of hitting the bases. They want to check out where they are, and that's fine. And that's, I think, what it should be used for, not for this sort of dictating what every child must learn at a certain age. Homeschoolers believe that all children want to learn. We have to believe this, because if we don't believe this, we're not going to be successful homeschoolers. If you are homeschooling a particularly difficult child, and many of you probably are, because a lot of us are being attracted to homeschooling because our children are having trouble in school. And so we homeschool these difficult children, and we are so tempted to think, this kid doesn't want to learn. But if we think that, if we really truly have that mindset, then we're not going to be able to teach our child. We have to force ourselves in one way or another to get into the mindset of this child does want to learn. This child wants to grow and become good at things and be successful at things. Every person wants that, but we need to figure out how to guide or mentor them to do that. Not all children and families fit into the public school model, and that's okay. That's something so hard. When I gave this talk, one of the parents said to me that she is sure that all of her friends at public school are going to drop her as soon as they start homeschooling. She said, they're going to think I'm weird. And I said, well, welcome to being weird. You know, we are weird in a truly fundamental sense to a lot of people, that we are stepping outside of this thing that everyone agrees with, that we all should fit into public school. Okay, so I'm reading Tamara, I take it you're a teacher. Yes, of course, teachers do their very best. And I don't want to ever, I actually know that there are some homeschoolers who really diss teachers about, who really insult teachers a lot and say teachers are these terrible people who are doing terrible things to kids. That's not me. In fact, I love teaching. I actually, my background is in teaching adults, but I love teaching. I actually loved schools before we took our kids out of school. I was always looking for this great school where I'd feel like I'd fit in, and we did. My son went to a charter school, which was a wonderful school. And so I'm not at all saying that there's anything wrong with teachers. I believe that teachers have been ill-trained and given a job that is nearly impossible, and that a lot of us end up taking our kids out of school after a really bad experience with a teacher. And so we have to go through a process of letting go. I don't actually have that in this talk, but in my book I do have a chapter about leaving school and what that's like. And it's hard, because you have to figure out a way to leave school without damaging further your child's educational experience. And so I think leaving school positively and saying the teachers did their best, this is just a bad situation, we just have to leave, is a really good attitude. Yes, Tamara, you sound a lot like me. My son was in school, so he went to a private school for kindergarten, which we chose because it was a really beautiful outdoor program, and it was a longer day. Our local public school, it was like 2.5 hours, and it started at 7:40 in the morning or something. It was crazy. It had nothing to do with childhood. So we gave him a year, then we put him in the charter school, and then something happened at the charter school, and we had to take him out, and we put him back into another private school. And so he had actually been in 4 schools by the time I started homeschooling. It took me a little while to get my head around the idea of homeschooling. And finally, a child who's unhappy and not learning needs guidance and love. A child who's unhappy and not learning is not a child who needs punishment, because punishment does not work. Especially if education. I wrote an article about rest and learning and how physically can in your brain. Child rest out. They actually physically can't learn. Like the audio problems. Okay. We had to. I'm going to turn my mic off and back on again. All right. Is everybody hearing me? Better? Okay. Yeah. Sometimes it seems like if I just unplug my mic and plug it back in, it comes back. So we have to understand that an unhappy child literally can't learn, that their brain is sending the input they're getting to the wrong place when they are in fight or flight mode. It sends it down to the brain stem, the lizard brain, where we react to things. So if you're working with a difficult child who you take out the math book and the child starts screaming, you're not going to get anywhere with that child. So you might as well put that book away. Guidance and love is what children who are not learning need. So how do we get there from here? So I'm going to tell you a little bit. I've already told you a little bit of my experience. I had this daughter. Well, I had a son who was,
a good student. He did fine in school. He was happy enough. It was, both my kids, my husband and I are very, he's a computer scientist, I'm a writer. We're very sort of brainy type people. That's the type of people we are. It's not surprising that our kids are sort of like that. And so, you know, he always felt that school was a little slow for him, but things worked out. We worked things out with him. My daughter was another situation altogether. She had severe emotional and behavioral difficulties as a young child, and that's a whole different thing, and I'm not going to talk about it because it's not education, but I've written about in my blog. And she just could not handle her kindergarten classroom. We tried a small private school hoping that it was out in the woods. It was in a redwood forest in a little cabin, and it was beautiful, and we thought it was going to be great for her. And even the small amount of structure in that school was really hard for her. So I ended up having to take her out of school, and we spent a couple months just hating each other because she's actually a real extrovert and loves being out and doing stuff. And I had been so looking forward to getting some time to myself because, as you can imagine, having a difficult preschooler, I was really needing a break. And so we spent a couple months being really angry at each other, and then I said, okay, I need help. And so I started looking for some other homeschoolers. And I found them, and I found out that, in fact, there were people that chose homeschooling not because they had to, which was quite a weird idea to me. I had never, you know, I had always thought of homeschoolers as people who chose homeschooling for, you know, either the two major groups are the Christian homeschoolers and the sort of alternative education in where I live, sort of hippie type of homeschoolers. And so you know, I was amazed to find out that people just chose homeschooling because I thought it was a better way of schooling kids or educating kids. And so I ended up totally changing my point of view on education. And I have two parents with PhDs. My husband and I both have graduate degrees. So we aren't anti-school, but we came to realize that the education, you know, the way schools are set up is not necessarily conducive to good education. So first thing is questioning your assumptions, your mindset about education. I had a completely school-based mindset about education. I really thought this is the way that people are supposed to learn, and it didn't occur to me people could learn otherwise. Take a good look at yourself, your family, and your child. What do you really need? I was trying to get my child to go to school when she really was not ready to be sitting in someone else's, yes, and I am getting to deschooling in just a second. It's my next slide. She was not ready to be in a school and following someone else's schedule, and I don't necessarily believe that following someone else's schedule sometimes is an unnecessary skill. I think it's a necessary skill. I mean, we all have to go and stand in line to, you know, get our driver's license or whatever. We all do have to learn how to do that stuff. And some jobs do involve working with other people's schedules and that sort of thing. So eventually that's a very good thing for your kids to develop, but when they're 5, not necessarily. So I had to really take a good look at my child and realize that I was trying to get her to do something that didn't work for her. And that this can be a long transition, because the part of my story I didn't tell was about my son, the one who had been to 4 different schools. I had been homeschooling my daughter for almost 4 years when I was having a conversation with my son, and I always thought of him as the kid who does well at school, you know. And I said something, he was saying he wanted to learn Japanese, and I said, yeah, you really don't have time. If you were homeschooling, and he just like, his eyes got wide, he said, I could homeschool? And the funny thing is that now he's my totally dedicated homeschooler and loves it. So I took him out of school after 5th grade. So I had always thought that we were going to be this sort of two-sided family, one homeschooler and one school kid, and that would be okay. And then I got both school kids. So, I mean, both homeschoolers. So it was an interesting transition. So my next slide about deschooling. Deschooling is the word that has been coined to mean the process of changing your attitude about education. So most of us started with that mindset of how education works. And so deschooling is a process that you go through to change your mindset. Deschooling is a process that your child goes through, because your child, if your child has been in school at all, even preschool, has probably some ideas like I need to wait and find, if it's a child who's okay with the behavioral stuff in school, I need to wait and be told what to do next. In my daughter's case, it was, if I do what I want, am I going to get in trouble like I did at school? In my son's case, it was like he'd say, well, what do I do next? And that's not the way homeschooling works, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I recommend a couple books, Deschooling Gently by Tammy Takahashi and Dismantling the Inner School by David Albert, who was just talking, and I hope some of you caught his whole talk. I only caught half of it. I just love David Albert. So if you didn't catch his talk, it was at 8 o'clock, and it was called something like The Average Giraffe, and he does wonderful research on education and people's ideas for education. And I will have a resources page at the end. And Lane, you went to it, excellent. Yes, he's great, and his books are wonderful. I'd recommend this one specifically because it's about deschooling. But my favorite book of his, and I'm looking over my shelf, Homeschooling and the Voyage of Discovery. And also, I will give you a link at the end of this talk to my page where I have all my links so that you can see all this stuff. Remember that you and your family are different from every other homeschooling family, and your journey will be your own. Yes, Tara, the recorded version should be up there now. It usually goes up pretty much automatically. So go ahead and look it up after my talk. So that you and your family are different, and so I get a lot of homeschoolers coming up to me and saying, you know, all my friends are unschoolers and it just doesn't work for me. That's totally fine. What works for you and your family is what your homeschool should be. If all of your friends are very, very conservative, structured homeschoolers, and that doesn't work for you, that's fine. And you have to, because your homeschool is not going to be successful if you don't don't do it the way that works for your family. So what do I call it? Qualities of a good student. So because this is a really important thing, because when you think about it, to deschool, to figure out how to be a successful homeschooler, you really have to think about, well, what did I have that made me a successful schooler? So in school, you follow instructions, you wait and be patient, you figure out what a teacher wants and provide it, because of course that's how you get a good grade, not by doing your best. That's just something people misunderstand about the school environment. In the school environment, not all teachers, again, I don't want to say all teachers like this, but most teachers want a certain answer. And, you know, they give out a worksheet, and the worksheet has a right or a wrong answer. Take tests. Test taking is a very important skill as a school child. For homeschoolers, it becomes an important skill only when applying to college. So it is a skill you eventually have to work on, but not necessarily. Deny physical needs, such as sleep, meals, fresh air, and exercise. Yes, very important that, you know, like the schools in my area start, I think the earliest one starts the day at 7:20, and it's the high school, and there's proven research that says that high schoolers in general, their circadian rhythms shift so that they stay up longer after dark and get up later in the morning. Yet in my district, the high school starts the earliest. You know, go figure. Deny personal needs in deference to classroom needs. And this is, like I said before, I'm not someone who thinks that this is not a quality that all of us need to have, because if you've ever worked with someone who won't deny any of their personal needs, you know how difficult and unproductive those people are to work with. But it's not something a child has to do for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week when they're 5. That just doesn't make sense. So here's the homeschool list, and I bet you're sort of already figuring out where I'm going with this. In homeschool, you need to determine what needs to be done and do it. And this is the child, not the young children, though. Unschoolers do want their young children to determine their goals as well. And maybe some of you are okay with that. Some of you might have kids who aren't okay with that. You'll have to wait for a while till they're ready to do that. But a successful homeschooler will eventually determine what needs to be done, grab an idea and run with it. Very important. Figure out goals and the path to attain them. If your homeschooler has no goals, that it's going to be hard to be a successful homeschooler. Judge one's own skills honestly, because you're in a totally different situation when you're in school as opposed to homeschool. You are not competing against other children. If you have siblings, they're at a different developmental stage, unless you're twins. So, you know, really it's suddenly this question of can your child judge their own skills honestly? Focus on goals. When easy and entertaining options are calling, lots of homeschoolers say that that's a huge issue, that the Nintendo calls to their children. And so that's I think a great thing about homeschooling. Your kids have to learn how to ignore this other stuff, and when they go off in the real world, they will have to do that too. If they're working and they've got something they've got to do for work, they can't go off and watch a movie, and the homeschooling will prepare them for this. And develop a strong will. Very, very, very important. So Tara says, wondering how much initial structure a child needs to be able to get there. You know, that is not something that anyone has come up with a definitive answer to, because unschoolers will tell you that their kids do just fine. So I haven't defined unschooling, and I should, because some of you might not understand what I'm saying. So I'm talking about unschooling. Unschooling is a child-led approach where the parents never tell the child what to learn. The parents, depending on the family, they may make suggestions. They may help them find resources. I think that most unschoolers are great at supporting their kids' interests and helping them learn the stuff they need to learn. Some unschoolers just don't do any of that. But so everywhere from way on the unschooling side to way on the structured side, people have different experiences with their children, and some of it might be just the child, him or herself. So for example, my younger child, who had so much trouble in the classroom, the first 2 years of homeschooling, I just sort of had to sit there and watch her and wait for her to say things like, can you drive me to the store so we can get this thing, because I'm making this machine that's going to do this, and I need this thing. And that was sort of what our homeschooling life was like. I didn't have to do anything to get her to succeed at this step or this step. This step a bit, because as she got more goals, I had to start helping her see how we do this. This one, I think almost all kids are going to need a little help with, just because if they haven't been compared to other people, they might not know what's out there, and they might think that it might be really hard for them, and it has been hard for my kids. My kids love the science fair, and they go to the science fair, and if they don't have a pretty good idea of how good their project is, how well it fulfills what the judges are looking for, before they go, they might be a little hurt by the outcome. And so I believe that this is a really important part of homeschooling. So, you know, it really depends on the child. So you'll notice that I stuck these next to each other, and they aren't, you know, they don't match up. I should have numbered them. So, you know, figure out what a teacher wants and provide it, figure out goals and the path to attain them. Totally, totally different things that your kids are going to need to do, whether in school or homeschool. How does a child move from school to homeschool mentality? So first of all, really important, this is unlikely to happen overnight, and watch for incremental changes. Generally the rule of thumb, and again, every kid is different, but the rule of thumb that people say is it takes a month per year of schooling to get a kid to really come to a good sense of being a homeschooler. And so for example, my daughter, who was 5, had no trouble, as I said, jumping right into homeschooling and doing her own thing. My son, who was 11 when I took him out of school, took over a year before I felt like he was actually homeschooling and not just resisting, trying to figure out what the minimum he could do to please me, all this sort of stuff that you really don't want in your homeschool. Address the school at home issue. Your job is not to do school better, but to do education better. So if you and your child are comfortable with having a curriculum and using workbooks, and that is totally great, but maybe your child is comfortable with that, but isn't comfortable with, say your child works best in the late afternoon and you're trying to make your child work in the morning. Well, you don't have to do what school does. The thing about homeschooling is you don't have to do what school does. So do look, even as structured as you might be, look at what you can do to make your child's education better. If you're an unschooler, obviously you're going to totally throw away everything that school taught you. So you don't have much trouble with that. Focus on success. This is so important. Oh, the question, Tamara asked, do I think that it was because my son was successful in that regular system? Oh, yes, definitely. He knew how to do the bare minimum to please the teacher, so then he could go off and do his other things that he wanted to do. And so when he started homeschooling, he had that attitude, and I thought he was going to be a great homeschooler, and I totally didn't even catch it until about 3 months, 4 months in, I don't know, I was starting to notice, wait, things aren't quite what I think they are. And then it really hit me about 9 months after we started homeschooling. I just realized, oh, we didn't really de-school, and we should have de-schooled because he is not doing well. And so we had to hit the brakes, retool everything, and we did it, and we got past it. So focus on success. This is something I learned with my daughter. As I said, a detox period. I love that. So as I said, my family is very academic. And when you go to the better universities in this world, not just in the United States, one of the functions of professors that you work with is to sort of be harsh on you and get you to see where you're not measuring up, and you're supposed to already be self-motivated because you're in college. But when you have a child, if you focus on their deficits, on the things they don't do well, and you're working with them at home, you're going to find that your relationship with your child is going to be poisoned, because your child is going to think of you not as the nurturer you've always been, but this person who keeps pointing out what he's doing wrong. And so focusing on success, especially with really young children, that was so important for me to learn with my daughter. And I realized that I just needed to throw away all of her failures from school and focus on her success. Your child's ability to be self-directed will vary widely depending on maturity and personality, so don't expect that to happen overnight. And some children won't do it. Well, they're finding now that the part of the brain that controls impulse control, that sort of thing, actually doesn't develop in most people fully until about the age of 25. So just know that you haven't failed if your 13-year-old is not self-directed, because most 13-year-olds still need a lot of support. I'm going to go through these next 3 slides, and you'll see that they have something in common. They have some language in common. Finding out who your child is, what your child's needs are. So this is the first step in changing your mindset, because you might have, like I had this mindset that my son was really good at school, and then homeschool became a disaster the first year. So you have to figure out what kind of homeschooler you have. Homeschooling can be transformative for kids. So you can see it happen quickly or slowly. I know someone who said that her daughter changed as if overnight. It was as if these heavy chains were taken off of her and she was freed. And it was this transformation that was so beautiful. Or you can have this really slow change over years, and it just depends on your child and what you're starting with. Question everything you learned about your child in the classroom. My older child in the classroom was a great student, and so I assumed he'd just continue being like that at home, and it wasn't the same. My younger child was a terror in the classroom, and she's a bit of a terror sometimes at home too, but not. But she's totally different. She became totally different at home. Allow a lot of experimentation. And I see there's a chat going on that I have not been paying attention to. Yes, it's video games. This is an issue, you know, and every family has to decide how to deal with how much freedom you allow, because some families say, just let them go, let them play video games 24/7, let them do whatever they want and they'll get sick of it. Other families say that's just not true of my kid. I have two very different children. One of my children, if he's playing a game on a computer and I say, okay, we need to do this thing now, he might grumble, but he turns off the game and he changes gears. My other child, getting her out of her game, she gets so into it, it's really difficult. So I can't agree with those people who say that I should just let her go forever because she wouldn't come out, she wouldn't eat, she would deny her physical needs. She gets so obsessed with it. So you really have to know your child, and everyone can give you their experience, but you can only judge on what your child is like. Finding out who you are and what your needs are, it is so important. Most homeschooling parents are the mom. Women are already more likely to deny their own needs for their children than men are. That's probably because of socialization mostly, and there might be some inborn gender differences, who knows, something about having carried the baby in your body, who knows, but in any case, you have to be really aware of this. Homeschooling can be a transformative process. You can find yourself questioning your own beliefs, questioning your abilities. An interesting thing to think about, there's this psychological theory of disintegration that we need to tear down in order to rebuild. And a lot of new homeschoolers go through this disintegration period where they start homeschooling and they think, I don't even know who I am anymore. Hang on a second. So find a way to take care of your needs. It's really important. If mom or dad homeschooler is not happy, then homeschooling family is not going to be happy. Your spouse who is going off to work or doing what your spouse does is not going to be happy if you are miserable. Your children are not going to be happy if you are miserable. So you need to find a way to get your needs met. And then finally, you have to balance, find out who your family is and what your family's needs are. And so that's, here we have three things that you're trying to balance. And as you all know, balancing two things is relatively easy. As soon as you add a third, you're juggling. Families transform. Parents, their roles change. Some of you might be quitting a job to homeschool, and so you might be going from wage earner to stay-at-home parent. Stay-at-home mom is most common, and that is a really huge, huge change. And you shouldn't deny that it's a huge change. It's a huge change for you. Importance of family meetings. If you don't already have some sort of formal thing with meeting with your family, you might need it, because you might need to have a time when it's just okay for everyone to air their grievances and everybody agrees, this is the time we're going to do it, we're going to sit down with each other, we're going to focus, we're not going to answer the phone, we're not going to be using our computers, we're going to talk to each other and look at each other in the eye. And so it really, really helps if you can have a time that you do that. If you're sort of loose family structure and that doesn't make sense for you, that's fine, but for a lot of us it really helps. Again, disintegration and rebuilding. Your place in the home is changing. Your relationship with your spouse and your children is changing. So be careful about the period you might go through where feeling like you don't even know what your family is anymore. So it might be this beautiful period. You might feel like there's this beautiful flowering. On the other hand, it might be a very difficult period. Homeschooling requires adaptation and change. So the importance of listening and adapting. Okay, so in school, what do teachers do? They, before the school year starts, they plan the whole school year. If they have taught this grade for multiple years, they might retool what they did a little bit, but they're probably going to do exactly the same thing, right? So they already know the whole school year, and so many new homeschoolers get so excited, and I see this so much. People saying, oh, I'm so excited, I bought a year's worth of curriculum. Number one, well, you'll see this on my top do's and don'ts, the next slide. Number one, don't spend money. because you probably will not use the thing you spend money on. You're not a school teacher, you're a homeschooler, and so you're very, very different. In homeschool, parents need to adapt to changing needs. You will learn and change. Your child will learn and change. Your family will evolve with your changing needs. And so you are not starting a school. You're starting a homeschool, and it's a very, very different proposition. Yes, Tara points out, and not only can homeschoolers ditch curriculum, unlike teachers, homeschoolers do that all the time. So here's what I see over and over. I meet someone who's a new homeschooler, and they say, I looked at this beautiful curriculum, maybe Oak Meadow. Oak Meadow is a popular homeschool curriculum. It's so beautiful, and I love it, and I bought the first year. My child is loving it. This is 2 weeks in. And then I see that person a month later. Do you know anyone who wants to buy a year's worth of Oak Meadow curriculum, only slightly used, because their child ended up not really working well with that curriculum? So my top do's and don'ts: do get to know your child again and have fun. This is the most wonderful thing about the beginning of homeschooling. Spend positive time with your child. Do not, if you're taking your child out of school, do not jump right into the deficiencies, the problems that have been pointed out to you in the school environment. If your child has trouble reading, the very best thing you can do when you first start homeschooling is no forcing your child to work on reading at all. I know it seems like you should be jumping right on that, but really that's the thing that you should give up first, so that you can give your child a little breathing room. I'm not saying don't do reading things that require reading. Go to museums. Read out loud to your child. Reading out loud. Homeschooling families, most school families stop out loud reading somewhere around 6 or 7 when the child does a lot of independent reading. Homeschool families regularly read to their teenagers. It's a great thing to do, reading out loud and listening to audiobooks. I love audiobooks. So say you decide on 4 road trips you're going to take at the beginning. You're going to go to a museum that you really like that's an hour drive away. You're going to go to a park that you are going to go for a hike in, and that's 2 hours drive away. So far you've got 2 hours in the first trip and 4 hours, so that's 6 hours to listen to an excellent audiobook in your car. So your child may not be working on his or her reading, but your brains won't be idle. So really, really, really get to know your child and have fun. Secondly, find a support system, not just for your child, but for you. Find other homeschoolers, and you are from all over the world. And like I said at the beginning, I can't give you local advice. But the first thing that I did was I called up the only homeschooler I had ever met in my life, and I said, help! Because as I said, my daughter and I spent 2 months at home hating each other, and I knew this was wrong. And so I reached out to another homeschooler, and all it took was one. She connected me with a bunch of others, and it was so helpful. Help family and friends see why this is a positive choice. And this is something that is really hard for a lot of new homeschoolers and some other homeschoolers, that family is not supportive. Try to tell them it's a positive choice. Try out lots of different experiences. Go to that museum. Go for a hike in the park. And explore your options. Have fun with this. Don'ts. I already said this. Don't spend money right away. If you're going to spend money, get a membership to a museum or a subscription to a magazine you like. Wait for a while to spend money in curriculum. Don't try to go it alone. Find your support system. Don't feel that everyone has to approve of your choice. So I said on the previous slide, try to help your family and friends see that it's a positive choice. Don't feel that everyone needs to approve. If they don't approve, it's not your job to be homeschooling ambassador to your sister-in-law. If your sister-in-law refuses to believe what you're doing is a good thing, then you can say, you know, I don't want to harm our relationship, so I think it would be a good idea if we just didn't discuss this anymore, because I feel that we're hurting each other's feelings. And just end it. because you don't have to be the person who gets your sister-in-law to love homeschooling. Don't get too overscheduled. Lots of us, at least in this country, I know lots of us are way overscheduled. Define your homeschooling. Don't define your homeschooling style before you try anything. Lots of us think that that we'll say something like, oh, I really love Montessori, and you invest all this money in Montessori homeschooling style, and then you realize that your kid doesn't really do well in that style of learning. So don't think that you have to know what you're going to be at the beginning. So my do's and don'ts, they also are paired up. These two are so important, and if you have a problem in your family with your choice to homeschool, please make sure you get support outside of your family. And Tamara points out that you can do in 3 hours what regular school does in 6+. Yes, so remember, you've got a lot of time. You can relax. They really don't get a whole lot done in a school day. And finally, don't worry. It will work out one way or another. So I love to remind people that educational choices are for now, not forever. Your child can go back to school if this doesn't work. You can change your homeschooling style. You can find other families to do a cooperative with. You can do anything. You have ways to work it out. Do start homeschooling. Some of you might be people who are just considering homeschooling. And this is what I tell people. I have never, ever, ever met someone who said, I really regret that I tried homeschooling. I've met plenty of people who tried homeschooling and went back to school, but I've never met anyone who regretted it. I have met so many people who regret not going to homeschooling when it was the right thing for their child. So just try it out, because it's not going to hurt your child to try it out. I'm going to click to my resources, and I'm going to point out there's no reason why the bullet next to Life Learning Magazine is red. It just did that. So anyway, there's all of my links, and I don't know if these links are hot in this, but no, they're not. You can go to this page, and you can download this as a PDF, and then the links will be hot. My links page, okay, I'm not sure why that thing came up. My links page, I will type in the chat. I think I have it in my, no. All right, so ignore what I'm doing here, because now I would like to, we have a few minutes for questions and comments, and I would love it if anyone wants to talk. You can just raise your hand or just turn on your mic and talk. I'm going to paste this. There it is. Oh, yes, and Tamara asks about Twitter, Facebook. I am most often on Facebook because I have trouble doing things in however few characters. I do post my articles on Twitter. You can go to my website, and I think I'm just like at Suki Wessling at Twitter, and I'm it's not me. It's definitely, Twitter's not me, but I do post all links to my articles and stuff there. And that's my Facebook page. And the thing that is sort of a pain about Facebook these days is that you don't actually see everything from the pages you subscribe to. So if you know how to make interest lists in Facebook, that's a good way to find, to make sure that you see everything that somebody posts, or you can just go to the page. Other questions? Thank you, Lainey, for coming. I know there was a conversation earlier, thank you, earlier about, I can't remember if there's something, oh yeah, the video gaming. That is that video game question is one that so many people have, and each family has to work it out in one way or another. But I can say, just from experience, video games are unlikely to damage the psyche of a happy, healthy child. So when you read those scare stories about them, as long as you're involved and you know what they're doing online and they're not getting involved with strangers online who are getting them to say things, to do things that they wouldn't, influencing them in ways that you wouldn't approve of, it's probably okay, and you need to balance it somehow. Because one of the important things about being a homeschooler is not becoming your child's enemy. Because if you're your child's enemy, you really have so much trouble homeschooling them because they have to think of you as their ally. And it's really important. Any other questions? We have 4 minutes. I can answer questions. And I'd be happy to. Yeah, so I actually, if you go to my blog and you search for Minecraft, and I will write down Minecraft. If you search for Minecraft, you will find a piece I wrote about when my children were first allowed to play video games. There's this wonderful game called Minecraft. Yesterday there was a session about Minecraft in education, and it was a wonderful session. You should go check it out if you're interested. And Minecraft facilitated the end of my son's really, really difficult homeschooling year when he wouldn't talk to other kids. He got into Minecraft and he bonded with other children over it. And so I feel totally indebted to Minecraft. It helped my daughter, who has trouble with social skills, learn social rules, because you also have to follow social rules. And yes, it can be addictive. And this is what I was saying about my daughter. When I tell my son, okay, time's up, we got to go, he'll say, okay, and he'll quit Minecraft, right? When I tell my daughter, time's up, we got to go, she ignores me. She's in there, she hums to herself, and she's so deeply in there. Yes, and well, Tara, life is about balance, and that's one of the things we need to teach our kids, right? So I am a very hardworking, energetic person, yet every once in a while I love to veg out watching a video on TV. I mean, that's perfectly healthy. And for your child, part of it is your modeling, because a lot of what you model will eventually be how your child lives their life, whether or not they do it as a teenager. Because the teenage years, let's face it, are about trying to figure out who you are. And the first thing that you think when you're a teenager is, I am not my parents. So your modeling is really important, even verbal modeling. So I find that a lot of people say that it is really helpful if they talk about things like, they might say to their kid, I really wanted to watch that movie last night that Daddy and I got from Netflix, but I had this work to do, so I did that instead. So I think I'll do that tonight. So modeling for them the behavior that you want them eventually to be able to do, to say, oh, that Minecraft is there, and I really, really, really want to be doing that, but I have to be doing something else right now, and thinking of it as that pleasurable thing will be there for me. And that's a hard lesson for kids to learn.
So I would love to thank you so much for this awesome presentation. It was really useful to me personally, and I think from the comments everyone else found it that way as well. Unfortunately, we have now about 20 seconds to make our way to the next set of sessions. And so I would love to remind everyone who's attending to please be sure to leave the chat room here. Just close the little X up on the screen so that the recording will actually process and we can all see it soon. And I'll leave those last few seconds to you, Suki.
Okay, and so thank you all for coming. I really appreciated hearing all your ideas. And please do, if you have questions, you can post them on my Facebook page, or there's a contact page on my website. So I'm going to paste that was my Facebook page. And my blog page is here. So thank you very much, and let's all go off and do some other wonderful activity. So see y'all on the internet. Bye-bye.